damage that game. It still was not enough though, just because of all the armor that the warrior can gain. So we'll see if Alutemu has any tricks up his sleeve. I would say the standard rogue game plan does not often get there against control warrior. So we're going to need to see a little bit of spark, some of that creativity that we've come to expect from Alutemu.
And the rogue is capable of doing that, right? With cards such as, say, Vanessa Van Cleef, and maybe not necessarily against warrior, but trying to pick up copied very high value cards. If he can maybe maneuver that to get War Cash, for example, maybe. But more importantly, I think it's all about Kazakus and potentially even taking 10 cost golems if the situation calls for it. If the curve signals that he needs 5 costs to do anything strong the next turn, then absolutely. But if he picks up Kazakus a bit later, I think there's definitely room to take something like Stealth or Divine Shield copy. And if he's seeing double Blade Storm, that can sometimes be problematic for Warrior.
100%. The only thing I was somewhat interested in, I guess more just as a talking point than necessarily a strong mulligan keep, was that Vanessa, because in my experience the best card that you can get is often Outrider's Axe, just because it's 9 damage straight up, and you don't have to mess around with getting value or anything like that. Even having said that though, keeping it in lieu of Octobot or Field Contact does feel a little bit shaky, so just going for the more standard curve does make sense to me, and he gets himself off to a decent start here, Alutemu. He's got a 1-drop, does just have to go for the dagger on 2, but man crick, Field Contact, it's slowly coming together.
Yeah, he does have decent ways to spend his mana. The Tenwu definitely earmarked for something a bit higher value than just a 2-mana 3/2 that returns Prize Plunderer to his hand. And notably, he played Prize Plunderer on 1 because this Control Warrior is not actually running things like Sword and Board that want to clear the early minions. Like, their big clearing power starts around 4 mana on the Outrider's Axe. Minefield is also in there, but GivePLZ would not want to use that on a singular 2/1.
Yeah, very, very smart. Just means that heading into the next few turns, there's going to be essentially no armor until a Rancor or a Shield Maiden can help with that. So your minions are a lot more survivable against the likes of Shield Slam. Taking a look at the options available here, Divine Shield was offered, which you'd have to imagine is pretty high up on the pecking order. And then while you can try and mess around with Wildvine to try and get a big board and then buff it, I do think that Grom's Blood to just summon a copy and have a 5-mana 10/10 worth of stats is the more consistent strat.
Yeah, it's very awkward to play that on an empty board where you do just run into Blade Storm, but if the Kazaka sticks around, then that's not a singular answer. It would end up on the Divine Shield copy, and also the Kazakas was really only Alutemu's only good play here, so I don't fault him for going for the 5-drop curve, even though we talked about the possibility for 10 drops a bit later on.
Yeah, that's right. Even though you can go for the kind of outvalue them game plan, it's kind of weird what you even mean by outvalue, because it's not running them out of removal entirely, it's running them out of removal that they have in hand. If their removal is all buried in their deck further down, then it doesn't matter, they technically have more available. If they can't use it, then you're still in the lead. So going for this immediate tempo kind of accomplishes that same outvalue game plan, where you're just throwing down your threats so quickly that they can't find the removal in time, which I think, as you correctly put, this Greaty Golem beautifully feeds into. The question is just, do you go for it now? Because, as you said, the Blade Storm is the really scary factor, and with the Org Merchant now, he can technically protect his Field Contact for a turn.
He could, but I feel like Blade Storm is scary then still, because GivePLZ just has this Outrider's Axe equipped. I think both plays are extremely weak to Blade Storm, but in the case that Blade Storm isn't there, Alutemu will be happier that the Greater Golem is played, right, because he gets to front load more damage. It's very unfortunate from Alutemu's perspective that there was just the Outrider's Axe to clean up the Kazakas, so he's just taking the gambit that Blade Storm is not there, and for now it isn't.
That's right. And so while GivePLZ has access to Barrow of Minefield as a kind of budget version of the clear, which does always get the job done, right? I don't think there's a situation where it can't get the job done in terms of clearing, thanks to the Barrow of Death Rattle. But the important factor is that's Barrow of Done. Barrow of out of the way for Alutemu, which is a pretty big deal. You know, quite a few of your minions are, that's quite funny, quite a few of your minions are just out of the range of Rancor, like Vanessa, as we see there, and the Divine Shield minions. But Barrow can make that a little bit easier to work with Rancor.
That's right. Alutemu has seen like 3 premium pieces of removal used, but the thing is Warrior has 8 to 10 of them, and then still the Outrider's Axe to consider. But he can't play around everything forever, right? You have to assume that at some point GivePLZ is going to run dry of the removal. Maybe he's hit some of the greedier cards at the top end that he's not really running for this matchup. So Alutemu going to go ahead and get rid of the Barov first, clear the runway for this one Thief. I do think Deep Freeze is where my head would be at because it's the highest value card, but you can sometimes pretty reliably get Rigged Fair Game to go off against Warrior.
That was a tough one, wasn't it? Because he's not actually guaranteed any more card draw. Like, realistically, you are expecting this field contact to die. And so taking the Rigged Fair Game was tempting, but I agree. I think Deep Freeze just about does enough to make it worth it. If that can push even just 6 damage, that is huge.
Alutemu just gonna play another Prize Plunderer for no good value. Because there's very few minions, he actually wants to shoot on GivePLZ's side. He's valuing the cycle a bit higher, trying to hit potentially Shadow Step so he can play Jandis's back-to-back. But this Eye of Cthulhu is pretty brutal. Alutemu was thinking, oh, I've seen 2 minefields. This board should sometimes be a bit awkward for GivePLZ, right? But not in this situation.
And that was kind of just the best outcome for GivePLZ. He gets to draw a card as well. Obviously, it chews up a charge of his axe, but you're not too devastated with that, given that another piece of removal coming in. Double Rancor Shield Slam. The Stage Dive as well to find Kargath is not to be sniffed at either.
Alutemu does have a decent turn though, Jandis, and Brain Freeze to get rid of the 1-3 just because it can help test for illusions. Oh, it's not a great Jandis though. But at least he curves pretty cleanly into the Deep Freeze.
He's spending his mana. That's the important thing. If you were just faffing about with no card draw, no minion development, that's when you can just pack it in as Rogue. But he has had, apart from Octobot, pretty much the best hand that you can possibly have as a Rogue. And he's kept the armor total in check, if nothing else.
There's still the Mankrik Enraged knocking about in Alutemu's deck, but the important thing for GivePLZ is that he's really not taken any minion damage that he didn't swing into, right? Alutemu has had, after the first Prize Plunderer, no leeway to actually get minions going through because the removal has been non-stop. It's been efficient every single turn, and now GivePLZ is ahead on board with this Venomous Scorpid.
Yeah, I think you're probably still just looking at Whirlwind. You don't need to be messing about with conditioning, just in order to make sure that you are guaranteed to get a good Rancor no matter what.
Yeah, I do think the Whirlwind is the most disciplined choice. I'd think about Information also as possibility because like he doesn't necessarily want to even play South Sea Scoundrel in this matchup where it draws Alutemu a card, but he still has Shield Maiden for anything proactive. So I think just making sure he has as many removal pieces as possible is the way to make sure you win what is a favored matchup. As for Alutemu, the Deep Freeze looks pretty clean on the Scorpid, and then hopefully he picks up a way to actually kill it next turn.
It does, but the one thing I'm considering is that this is one of the best Vanessas you're ever going to be offered because Scorpid is just very, very good in Rogue. It almost always offers you some form of damage. And so deviating away from the Deep Freeze, given that it doesn't really develop much less attack on the board, is, I think, an acceptable deviation here.
Yeah, I think it's quite smart. Shadow Step picked up, you can just get more Scorpids. That's the way to spend your mana.
Sure, so do you...
Potentially even like Tenwu the Vanessa and then step the Tenwu if he wants to have that in his back pocket for Alex Straza.
That's
but
true.
It means he can't play the Scorpid or the second Scorpid this turn.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, right? Because you get an extra body with this play, but it means you have to discover, wow, okay, a different spell instead of Shadow Step. But what do I know? You can just chain the Shadow Steps infinitely. It's just all Vanessas and Scorpids all the way down.
Look at GivePLZ's reaction. I'm glad to see that he's in somewhat lighter spirits because we did think GivePLZ was maybe a bit tilted at the end of last week.
Yeah.
Losing on Token Druid quite a couple times, but this is genuinely funny.
I can take the hit.
So even though that looked like a very slow turn from Alutemu, he did manage to accomplish basically deleting a Bladestorm from GivePLZ for almost for free. Like, he has the Vanessa used and a Foxy Fraud, but then he still has net 1 Scorpid benefit. So I think that actually worked out pretty well for Alutemu.
Yeah, I think he's happy to go about it this way again. It's slow, as you said, but honestly, any minions he can develop are very unlikely to stick anyway. And it's not like if he takes a turn off of active strong development, it's not like GivePLZ is going to be able to drastically swing the board in his favor. Like the best he could do here is a 5/5, which is fine. You know, it's very answerable for a rogue.
And the water elementals are low-key pretty problematic for GivePLZ because that's the type of minion he would like to, say, play this Corsair Cash, use a second Outrider's Axe to kill. But then if he hits it, even if he does kill one, he'll be frozen for the next turn. And if the other one sticks around, very likely frozen for the next following turns as well. Alutemu's hand is a bit awkward though because it's lacking the card draw. I think he'll be hoping to get something like Secret Passage off of this third Scorpid.
Very true. I think GivePLZ here can look for a pretty clean Kargath off of the buffed, well, when it's buffed off the stage dive, so that it can just be 6 attack, take one of them out cleanly. Only other alternative is now that you have Bladestorm, you could just go for a Bladestorm Whirlwind and then I guess finish with Southsea to again finish the turn ahead on board with a 5/5.
Worth thinking about, but I do think the Bladestorm has a bit more utility and on a board where he isn't actually killing off his own minion here. GivePLZ is able to use Shield Slam instead to get rid of both and be doubly ahead on board. I think this is a much better use of resources. Even though his Kargath is frozen, the Shield Maiden will be able to attack next turn.
Were you at all interested in Coin Scoundrel at the end instead of Hero Power, just to again get further ahead on the board?
Potentially, but I really think that the way that Alutemu can come back in this game is just having his deck thinned. Even if it's a useless for now card, it's one draw closer to, say, Mankrik Enraged, Secret Passage, and I think GivePLZ is in no rush, right? As long as he's ahead on board for the most part, he doesn't need to give Alutemu any additional draws because he'll win in Fatigue later on anyway.
That's fair. My idea was just that with both prize plunderers gone, it's actually fairly difficult for Alutemu to get the strong clears at this point. So minions for GivePLZ very often act as removal because Alutemu can't use his own removal to get rid of them. But I think your argument is very valid about not wanting to thin his deck still.
Very true. Well, the third Scorpid provides Swindle, which is much needed card draw for Alutemu, but he's still not picking up the heavy hitters, and honestly, most of them are gone, right? Mankrik, Jandis, Kazakus, usually that's enough to beat down most decks in the meta, but not Control Warrior. They just kind of laugh in the face of that type of minion development. Misses on the Outrider's Axe, does GivePLZ though, so just a little bit awkward here. The Bladestorm also is kind of net negative for him in terms of the amount of stats removed on board. Game with Rancor.
Right, and so what I was going to lead into is, yes, this is a decent Rancor. You can gain 8 armor immediately and take effectively all the damage off the board. But you can just pass. There's not really any need to. If your opponent wants to smack their minions into your minions, fantastic. It's not going face and you're very happy.
Alutemu does manage to stick a board that could push minimum 7 damage because of the awkward state he created, but the 7 feels so lacking when GivePLZ at above starting HP, and Alutemu has not picked up either of his Secret Passages or the second field contact, and so it's really awkward and slow turn here that I feel like maybe involves even stepping the Scorpid to get something better to do.
It feels that way, doesn't it? You could go Tenwu, replay the Scorpid, and then Shadow Step the Tenwu. The problem is that this Scorpid really actually just wants to trade into one of the minions so that your other guys have a little bit more leeway to go face.
And it also, the Tenwu kind of wants to be saved for Alex Straza. If Alutemu might have any way back into the game, it's perhaps with some game-ending damage. But then again, there's always the Bulwark to have to be concerned about that kind of negates that game plan. So looks like Alutemu is just going to take a hero power pass turn, hoping to use the Shadow Step on that Tenwu for Alex, you'd have to imagine, or maybe even one Thief.
Oh, and there's the Outrider's Axe. The card draw is just not even beginning to slow. GivePLZ, his deck size is equal to Alutemu's, if you wanted to know how many cards he's drawn. And he's running Cthulhu pieces as well, right? Like, this is ridiculous how many more cards he's drawn than Alutemu. Alutemu should have 0 cards in his deck at this point.
He even trades a 6-2 into a 3-2 rather than slamming it away. That is how much GivePLZ values his removal. Honestly, I kind of wanted to slam there. He seemed double prize plunder, but here you go. For Alutemu, the draw he's been waiting for. He can probably see the bottom of his deck within the next 2 turns. Secret Passage picked up now.
Yeah, big deal. Not all too many cheap spells left, but a single Swindle or an Org Merchant, something like that, will help him out drastically. Olga, not really what you wanted to see, but those are okay. Just allows you to keep up on the card draw.
He will have the Wicked Stab in hand by next turn, and I don't think he'll overdraw even if he goes one Thief, Guardian Aug Merchant, at least on the previous hand. These are not the spells Alutemu was looking for. I think he wanted Damage or another Deep Freeze, even Evocation at this point, just any value. But, I don't know, Devolving?
Yeah, Devolving for Kargath Prime. It doesn't sound great, but these are bad options. You just pick the cheap one, I think, and move on with your life.
And with a shield on his field contact, so it's not dead straight up to Outrider's Axe, but the Scorpion sticking around is also quite a big problem.
I think he might hold on to the Orc Merchant as well, just for a guaranteed procer on the Octobot, because this is a hand that very much wants to be reduced, especially if he can top deck Alex as the next card, because without that, things are looking very slim for his chances anyway.
I think Alutemu is completely on the Alex combo game plan now with the 2 Wicked Stabs in hand. There's quite a lot of burst to be had. You know, if he gets double discounts on Alex and Tenwu and gets the Shadow Steps, that's like 36 damage all in one turn with the Wicked Stabs. But it's a bit ambitious to get the double discounts with only 1 procer and 1 Octobot in hand right now. The other one's still in deck. Not to mention GivePLZ has this Bulwark of Azeroth that I think Alutemu's aware of, right? Because he should know there's one more weapon that was drawn by Corsair Cash, and then this Outrider's Axe was drawn naturally.
Yeah, he can't really do all too much with that information, admittedly. Just make sure he has a weapon equipped to swing through the charges for when he wants to go for the Alex turn. But for GivePLZ, I mean, I'm looking at Rancor, obviously, because I don't actually think there's that many more small minions in the deck that are actually worth Rancoring away.
It's true. At the armor total, nice and high. Heart of Cthulhu is somewhat similar, but just doesn't give him the armor. And he really doesn't need Cthulhu to be completed to win this matchup. So I think it's better, even though the Scorpion is still just dead to the dagger. Here's the second Octobot for Alutemu. I don't think he has a second procer, though, other than the Guardian Aug Merchant. So it's gonna be tough to get double discounts.
Alex Straza is the last minion in his deck, though, so he is guaranteed to draw it here off the Swindle, I believe. At which point he can then reduce it, of course, with the Octobot and the Orc Merchant and go for a much higher OTK potential. Like, he has all the burn in his deck right now. All of it, even with both Octobots, if you want to count those as burn, just because of the ability to get multiple procs and make everything super cheap. But I still don't know if this is going to be enough because of that Bulwark in GivePLZ's hand.
The crucial thing to note is that Alutemu did get the Mankrik this turn, so it's like for GivePLZ to both have the mana to equip the Bulwark and deal with this entire board. It's a bit awkward because this is the shape of board where it kind of requires Brawl and one more thing to get rid of everything. I do think GivePLZ in most situations will be able to full clear though, and Alutemu is just going to preload the Wicked Stabs because his mana is completely spoken for next turn. I think with only 1 discount though, it means only 2 Alexes playable next turn.
Yeah, you're just going Alex, Tenwu Alex, and then you Shadow Step the Alex rather than the Tenwu, right. I think, so that you can just go 8 damage on 2 consecutive turns. It's a little clunky because he wasn't able to get the double Octobot activation, but you take what you can get.
Yep. There are matchups in Rogue where you sometimes step the Tenwu a bit earlier, even the Octobot, to get the discounts where everything can come down at once, but using each Shadow Step kind of reduces your maximum burn by 8, even though it can speed up the time in which you get the combo. But right now it's more about getting the maximum burn, and GivePLZ gets the best outcome off this brawl, which is huge, because now there's no minion left on board to take off some charges from this Bulwark, which I'm pretty sure is coming down.
Yep. Anything else would be a literal 100% throw. So for the Bulwark coming down, I mean, like, there's a lethal on Alutemu's side. He has exact lethal. It's just the Bulwark in the way that makes this so horrible. He has 5 turns to try and chew through it now.
Yeah, it's a lot of fatigue to think about. And now GivePLZ can play his farm mana 5/5. And I guess that's what Alutemu took the Flame Strike for, in the situation where he has to kind of outlast the Bulwark in 4 procs of fatigue. Sometimes the Octobot sticks and gets some damage in, sometimes, but I think that's well worth a Blade Storm at this point. Or a Maw.
And it's easy to say, man, Alutemu got so close this game, which he did. But that's the way the matchup always feels. Like, the Warrior makes you think you got close, but close and actually getting there are worlds apart. It's an exact science, this burn damage against Warrior, and if you're not quite there, then you don't get the win. There's no prizes for coming close.
And Alutemu did deliberately draw to the Alex immediately, which, you know, some viewers might be thinking, why would you do that if you know it's going to be a fatigue battle if there's going to be the Bulwark of Azzinoth? But every turn he waits to actually discount the Alex, and Tenwu is a turn where GivePLZ can start developing his own things, and then Alutemu has to contend with the board and then getting the combo online and then still dealing with the Bulwark. And GivePLZ won't be pressured to equip the Bulwark until he sees that the combo has been fully discounted.
It's a pretty lethal combo as well for GivePLZ. The Armor Vendor plus Minefield, just to straight up gain 4 armor at any point as well, if he needs to.
Oh yeah, Armor Smith. It's been a while since we've seen that.
Oh yeah, Armor Smith, did I say Vendor? Oh well.
Alutemu holding onto the Flame Strike, trying to keep something else up, but yeah, this Kargath is not going to die to that, and Alutemu will be dead to fatigue if he doesn't remove it, so that means he's forced to Alex a minion, and that means he doesn't really have that much burst.
Yep, just all fell apart. From GivePLZ, the only thing he would be afraid of is Mask of Cthulhu off the spell, and it quite clearly, after the last couple of turns, is not Mask of Cthulhu, or it would have come down. And so then he very much knows that Alutemu can just concede. It's a rough one, but that's the way the matchup goes. One of the main reasons that you are bringing Control Warrior, as I was saying just a little earlier, Alutemu himself will tell you. And overall, I think just well played by GivePLZ. He knew exactly when you're able to hold back. The turn where he was neophyted and didn't remove any of these minions to let Alutemu overcommit, I suppose, into a Rancor. It's just great understanding of the matchup.
And I do think that was like an above average outcome in terms of how much extra value Alutemu was able to generate. He essentially got free 1/3s off the Scorpid Vanessa Shadow Step, and then like the actual thing he got from Vanessa that's not the Scorpids itself is 1 more Deep Freeze, was it? Or yeah, I mean this turn afterwards. It wasn't like GivePLZ definitely took this turn in stride, because all it happened to take was 1 additional Blade Storm from him, which was not a very big deal. But, you know, Rogue is in such a position in this matchup where the outcomes off of One Cleave and Scorpid need to be completely insane to beat the Bulwark of Azzinoth.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the Shadow Steps could have just refreshed themselves, so he ended up with a Swindle, was, I think, pretty much what he got off the end of that, which is not an especially high amount of value, but given that his card draw was so limited in that mid-game, it was still his best chance of pulling back into the game. But Alutemu taking the loss, the Control Warrior getting a win there, to be expected. I think the only real strong counter he had to that was his OTK Demon Hunter on the other side. But now for Alutemu, still left with a few good matchups, I believe. The OTK Demon Hunter for GivePLZ could be in a bit of a scary position against the likes of Rogue and the Rush Warrior. The Rogue could be in a rough spot against the Rush Warrior as well. So for Alutemu, his own Warrior, I think, is also very likely to get a win, even if it's different archetypes.
Yeah, they have very similar lineups outside of the differences in the Warrior, like you said, but it turns out that the matchup spread is quite similar when you remove the factor of OTK Demon Hunter, where I think Rush Warrior has a stronger matchup there, especially this greedier version from GivePLZ. But that's not to say that it has no chance, because even though like there's the Ooze and the OTK Demon Hunter as a tech to get rid of Bulwark of Azzinoth, like Control Warrior does have Mutinous to sometimes pull out the Il'gynoth or even like a Moarg if they needed every single combo piece to get past the breakpoint at the end. It's like taking a similar position as Vol'jin did in the build that the Japanese players were running in the previous weeks. As for the Rush Warrior to Control Warrior head-to-head, though, I feel like Rush Warrior has a leg up there, but I could still be corrected, right, because that matchup is relatively new. So I felt that going into the series, Alutemu was probably favored overall, but now that the Control Warrior is out of the way, I do think it's all about whether those Demon Hunters can get the win.
And we'll have to see. I think Alutemu has consistently been playing this deck very, very well. One of the earliest adopters of double Throglaive, which is, as I've been saying for a while, something that I've liked more and more as I see, mainly the one Throglaive, but double Throglaive here is very intriguing just because it gives you a little bit more redundancy in your board clears. I think that's one of the things that players have realized is, you know, even if you cram more card draw into your deck instead with, say, the acrobatics that Glory and Possessy went for, if you have to use all your combo pieces on removal, it doesn't matter how quickly you're drawing because you never have the combo if you have to always use it. And so the Throglaives allow you to keep those combos a little bit more greedily and use alternate removal pieces instead, which is clever thinking.
Yeah, Alutemu is the only one running double Throglaive in the entirety of APAC. I think some people have single Throglaive, even as practice partners, but Alutemu's always been a fan of at least one, and now he's gone all the way and cut the ooze for second Throglaive. And I just noticed now that there's actually not an ooze in Alutemu's OTK Demon Hunter, so it was actually still a good matchup for Control Warrior going into that. So I don't think, after all, that it's a big deal that GivePLZ eventually had a win with the Control Warrior. He's going to queue up the Miracle Rogue now versus the OTK Demon Hunter, where I do think the double Throglaives instead of an additional Ethereal Aug Merchant is going to help Alutemu.
Big time. It's the perfect size of removal to clear off the majority of rogue minions. You don't even have to combo it with spell damage or Moog. It just kills all their 2-drops and a bunch of their 3-drops as well with just the straight up 2 damage. Obviously it gets a lot worse if your opponent times their neophyte correctly, because then you're obviously playing double for every activation you want to go for it. It gets very expensive very quickly. But overall, like you said, the extra removal, that has been where Demon Hunters struggled against the likes of Rogue. They simply can't cram enough Immolation Auras in their deck to fight back against all these weeny little minions that just seem to always get there in terms of the damage. But again, Alutemu, I think similarly to we saw from Surrender yesterday, has just been very good at going for these what appear to be risky game plans, but overall are just the correct approach to the matchup where you accept some amount of risk in terms of overdrawing or dying to certain lethal outs from your opponent, but it gives you the overall best win rate, which has been a key part of the good Demon Hunter play.
And I recall one of the games that Alutemu actually lost on the OTK Demon Hunter in Grandmasters was a very close situation where he had to decide between outcasting a skull or keeping a discounted combo piece in Blood Mage Thalnos. And when he recalled the game later on, he figured that it was probably better to keep the Thalnos because he actually had everything he needed. He didn't need anything else discounted from the skull and could have played the skull for non-outcast value. And I think those tiny decisions and being able to identify that that's where you went wrong is the mark of a good Demon Hunter player. Going to start off with keeping the double Illidari studies. Nothing out of the ordinary here.
And I think then you just go Philosophy, right? Because it's an outcast card. And so you don't want to go Illidari studies and then eat up the discount with Philosophy. And so just getting that played, because you're probably going to have to play your Moog if you're planning on finding Skull. It does, of course, mean that there will be another card in the way if you pick Skull off Illidari studies and plan to move it over to the left. But still, it was pretty close there, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, Alutemu could be, he maybe had done the math quick enough where if you go Philosophy and then have to dump a Morg, that he wouldn't be able to like play Skull from the left with the double studies anyway. Like it might still happen turn 5 instead of turn 4. I would have to like go back and really observe this to see if that's possible or not. But there was also, I think, some consideration for double jump there before Philosophy in case you get Skull off of the double jump. And then you kind of want the Morg from Philosophy to be on the right side of that.
That's fair as well. But now 2 skulls already for Alutemu, which is pretty good actually. You know, you might see that as an awkward draw, but given that the left-hand side of his hand is very dumpable, he can just go, yeah, for the philosophy. Sure, you have to eat up the discount, but with another one ready to go, that is not too uncomfortable of a situation in which to be.
Yeah, the skull will cost 5, so as long as he plays the Moarg turn 3, the one on the left, that is, he'll be able to coin out skull on turn 4. And that's the kind of situation that, that's why I was talking about. Maybe he wouldn't be able to do this anyway if he had played both of the studies for the skull after philosophy.
Interesting. Again, we see the Crimson Sigil Runner picked, but not played because of wanting to bank the mana discount. And I think more than anything else, he's thinking, okay, I have 2 skulls in hand. I'm going to have too many cards. That costs 1 mana. Let's pick it and just dump it as a 1 mana 1/1 at some point.
Sometimes even draws him. But for GivePLZ, it's been a very slow start. No Octobot, no Mancrick, not even like Foxy Swindle or Foxy Vanessa to get rolling with. It's a very, very awkward hand that the Jandice feels like she's going to be a bit too slow. It's not even got a clean way of dealing with the Moarg because the Wicked Stabs are kind of earmarked to be threatening lethal a little bit later on.
Yeah, really going to be looking instead for Brain Freeze. He now does have a clear with Octobot, proc his own Octobot with the Orc Merchant, and then Dagger Prize Plunderer to clear it off. I don't think you have any other play realistically.
Yeah. Like, you could think it sucks to be using the discounts on just a couple cards, but these Octobots weren't in his hand to begin with, so might as well seize the board with these cards that you're not going to see again for quite some time, because they came off the Secret Passage.
I mean, unless you just want to go Octobot, Prize Plunderer, your opponent's Moarg, and then just save the discount for when your hand returns. But the problem is then that the Moarg is still on the board, so I-Beam just straight up deletes your Octobot without getting the proc anyway.
Yeah, it's a little bit too ambitious to hope that the Octobot discount could land on his original hand. So I like that GivePLZ is just seizing the board here, but this is very little pressure, so Alutemu is free to coin the first skull. Ideal things to discount are, of course, combo pieces, but something like Eldrazi Warblades too, as a nice dumpable card that also lets him relieve some pressure, is ideal.
Ooh, interesting.
Wow.
So I think you can get away with just chilling here for a turn. You don't need to clear this board quite yet. 5 damage on the board is, you know, a little threatening, but not the end of the world. Next turn, once they develop a little bit more, you can play your 0 mana Immolation Aura and very possibly play the skull from the right-hand side, depending on what they, depending on what you draw.
Yeah, well, this Neophyte is going to make that near impossible, though. Good timing from GivePLZ, whether or not he knew that there was another skull in hand. But the only thing I was considering that previous turn for Alutemu was whether he maybe uses 1 Throglaive if he is just trying to outcast the skull from the right because of hand space issues. Because he might not necessarily be able to Throglaive without it regenerating on the next turn. Now that idea is kind of blown out of the water, but this is still a decent Immolation Aura turn where he can just maybe dump some of the combo pieces instead.
Yeah, you probably don't want to go for Throglaive, right? Because although the original one costs 0, the others are going to cost 2. And even if you are expecting Jandice next turn, Throglaive will still be perfectly reasonable, I think, to get yourself a board clear on all the important parts of a Jandice board. And so... are we ever considering going like Immolation Aura, Crimson Sigil Runner, and then just Skull? Like I guess you overdraw a card then, but just wanting to spend your mana proactively because otherwise you're kind of not doing much with the rest of your turn.
Yeah. I was looking at something like Hero Power the Octobot and then Thalnos Immolation Aura, and then at worst he can end on Arcanist as 1 card less in hand to get a cleaner skull the next turn, because he does have second Arcanist, but it looks like he is just going with the Throglaives plan, valuing the aura a little bit more, which is, you know, very fair because he hasn't seen Kazakus or Jandice yet. It's an expensive Throglaives, but it retains Alutemu's best clearing option with the Immolation Aura for what he expects to be a higher pressure turn from GivePLZ.
Yeah, that's fair. I think maybe I was a little hesitant to play it when clearing 3 minions here is still just pretty good overall.
Decent Jandice for GivePLZ.
Yeah, very clever to not rush in the Tent Trasher as well, just because you want to play around Moog Immolation or you know, Thalnos Immolation or whatever it may be. Just play around the breakpoints a little bit more and try to stick anything on this board if you can.
But as it happens, everything is within range of Arcanist, Immolation, Aura, but just throw glaives might be a better way of going about that.
This is
He could have
smart.
gone something like Thalnos, Arcanist, throw glaives.
That's true, but by going this way, deliberately not killing something with the throw glaive, he gets to clear the board, play the Outcast Skull, still has the left-hand skull ready to go as well. He is pretty likely to find some kind of a combo piece to discount here, given that he's reducing 9 cards over the course of the game. Completely whiffs here, just finding more card draw. I mean, honestly, maybe you just don't play this card draw because you would rather draw off the skull than fill up your hand with full cost cards.
Yeah, it's very close, right? Because these cards are not dumpable because they all refresh themselves at least for one more card. And he does really want that left-hand skull more than anything because, crucially, he hasn't discounted any combo pieces at this point. He's discounted further card draw. And so that left-hand skull is still looking pretty tempting to outcast. So I wouldn't mind Alutemu completely holding on here. That last turn was very cleanly done, though, in order to make sure he could get the skull down and clear the board.
And realistically, you can tell he was not certain about that play whatsoever. I think even if he held, he wouldn't have been able to just go skull straight up. He would have had to have dumped something first, which makes it a little awkward. But that Moonfang into a second Jandice is the kind of turn that GivePLZ needed to make. Finally, he is putting some real pressure on the board, really threatening Alutemu. And with that Immolation Aura gone, things are looking scary for Alutemu, especially as not only the Immolation Aura, his entire hand had disappeared at that point.
And without throw glaive as well, I don't see a way that he gets through this where he obviously needs to draw and he needs to get some sort of spell damage used. So one philosophy used to make sure he has an extra Moar, get the stats while it's in outcast position. You're looking for Fellscream Blast, looking for second Aura.
I see.
That can find I-Beam, or is guaranteed to find I-Beam right at this point, which is a big deal with the Moags as well. You can at least heal up a little bit while clearing off some of the board.
Yep. Oh, but is some enough? We're looking at this Wicked Stab in GivePLZ's hand, One Thief to potentially pick up even more burn. And Alutemu has not hit the second Immolation Aura, so does look like it's going to have to be I-Beam and then I'll draw. No, he has to play a Moarg, right?
You have to play a Moog, right? Does he not want to kill off the run stack with the, or even the Mist Runner? Wow.
Oh, okay. I guess he's just trying to go for lethal then with Il'gynoth, but he's leaving 18 damage on board?
Yeah, and he just missed an attack as well. It's, again, one of those spots where Alutemu, you can tell there was a lot going on under the bonnet there, and he was trying to pass through everything, but it was just too slow, unable to find, you know, I don't want to call this wrong, because it needed exactly double Wicked Stab for him to be dead, right? Like, we could call that a calculated risk, and in another world, maybe he would have survived. Obviously, missing the attack was just wrong at the end there. But it was not necessarily a bad play for Alutemu, who gave himself immediate outs on the following turn with a potential skull off the top. Playing the left-hand skull. But it was still really, really scary there. That was, you know, I think maybe the kind of dancing a little bit too close to death compared to what could have been a calculated risk.
Yeah, true enough. And you could tell he wasn't certain at the end there. I think the macro game plan still made sense, right? He was saying, if I have to use an I-Beam on this board, I'm probably not winning the game in the long run, even though I might be able to stay alive more often on the very next turn. He was going for that, hoping that if there's one Wicked Stab, he stays alive and then goes for immediate lethal. But the execution was not ideal, right? Missing that attack. And even a little bit later, going for the Spectral Sight at the very last second and being kind of unsure whether it was worth it. It was like one of those Demon Hunter hands where it gives you the hardest decisions, right? Sometimes everything is handed to you on a silver platter when the skull discounts Moarg, Il'gynoth, and Talented Arcanist. But when it only discounts further card draw, you suddenly have to go back to the drawing board and realize how many of these card draws do I actually need, and is it going to be more problematic when the things he actually needs to discount are combo pieces instead.
You're not wrong. It was about as bad for a triple skull game, it was about as bad as things could go for Alutemu, missing all the combo pieces. It means that GivePLZ 2-0 up now, only needs a win with his OTK Demon Hunter, and what a different picture he paints this week compared to last week. We saw GivePLZ emoting before a single card had even been played, spamming down the well played, threatening his opponent. He was tilted off the face of the earth last week as he was, looking at potentially getting that top spot if he'd been able to continue and get a first place finish. Wasn't able to do that. But this week seems a lot more cool, calm and collected, got his mental game on point. Maybe that's just because things are going his way this week and they weren't going his way last week. But even so, it's looking like a much more composed GivePLZ this week than last week.
Yeah. I'm happy to see that he was having a good time even when he was getting infinite scorpited. I mean, because probably it wasn't that big a deal for him. It was just one Blade Storm that it took to get rid of that entire board. But you can see a while ago with the back-to-back Jandice game plan, I think he completely understood that while Alutemu did have a very nuts skull, his out was if that skull did not discount combo pieces. He had seen 1 Immolation Aura and 2 Throwglaives used by that point. So that was when he decided to go all in with that huge Jandice board, and that was enough to push him through for lethal. But now GivePLZ will be on the OTK Demon Hunter himself, and he has been given Skull on the far left, so something tells me he'll be much composed this game as well.
Yeah. Or if he's not composed, it will be in a celebratory sense, I think, rather than punching his monitor sense, as we were close to last week. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, Alutemu got a double skull last game, but something already tells me this one is like to be a little bit more potent.
I am once again in favor of Sigil Runner because he wants to bank this mana and then have the cheapest card after everything from the left has been played.
No, I agree.
As for Alutemu, he's now on the rogue side of things with a decent opening hand, if only just because of the Octobot. There's not many things he actually wants to discount, but a field contact off the top in the near future will remedy all of that.
Oh, it's just so awkward. Like, again, Neophyte at the start is okay. It's a 2-mana 3/2 that very likely sticks. It's only Eye Beam that can realistically kill it off at the start. Everything else is just too expensive, thanks to the spell increasing in cost. But it's not when you want to play Neophyte. It's so much more impactful later on. Imagine if going into turn 4, he can deny the coin skull, deny the skull the turn after either. So I do think, despite the fact that it's a third of the damage he's representing, it's still just worth it to go for it this way.
Yeah. And just being aware that it's turn 4 you need to play it into and not turn 5 is something Alutemu will be very familiar with because he saw that studies and he saw the card far left kept. Like, if there is one fallibility of Demon Hunter, you can have very strong reads on their hand based on just how the mulligan goes.
That's true. That's true. It's like, haha, I know that you have the hand I can't possibly beat. You got me there.
I can concede 5 turns early.
And maximize crying time.
Well, GivePLZ doesn't have a clean way of killing the Octobot, which is one saving grace for Alutemu, but he also doesn't have a way of proccing it. So it might be Secret Passage next turn. Oh, sorry, this is turn 4 rather. So it's going into the skull.
Yeah, there you go. Like you said, Alutemu had the absolute read there. Didn't even have to think about it for a second. And it means now GivePLZ's hand goes from God tier to, A tier. Like, it's still a good hand, but it's going to be a little bit awkward on this turn. He has to dump some of his resources. Doesn't really want to play the Philosophy or the Crimson Sigil Runner, however, just because of, again, banking that mana discount for the following turn. But I guess just Orc Merchant, you're fairly happy to just throw down, if nothing else.
Alutemu would love an Aug Merchant of his own to proc this Octobot because, I mean, this option is honestly very interesting because while you can just say Apexis Blast is damage, it's very inefficient damage, even if you get it discounted by the Octobot. There's a world where Mana Biscuit becomes relevant if he's trying to get down the Tenwu Alex combo, which, you know, he can maybe discount this Tenwu with the Octobot. It's super ambitious, so I think potentially even Font of Power just to spend this last mana is where my head would be at, but Alutemu's just going with the damage here.
They all had their merits. Like, if you just get yourself another Wand Thief, any of the spell damage options are pretty premium. If you can get yourself Aegwin or one of the cheaper ones as well to combo with your Wicked Stabs, I honestly wouldn't have been astounded at any of those picks.
And Alutemu just goes ahead and spends that last mana to proc his own Octobot, realizing that GivePLZ, like, even though it'll be very tough for GivePLZ to kill the Octobot straight up going into a Neophyte turn, Alutemu just wanted that mana spent so he could have the most flexibility with Secret Passage for next turn, you'd have to imagine.
You're paying for my discretion.
Does succeed with Disruption. GivePLZ floating quite a bit of mana because, you know, if he played that Spectral Sight, then he'd lose the discount on the Skull, and then hand space is also an issue. So this is the window Alutemu bought himself, and it's going to have to be a pretty spectacular passage. Neophyte again.
That's a pretty good passage, actually. Just being able to go super wide on the board. If your opponent doesn't have Immolation Aura here, you're pushing quite a lot of damage. And Mask of Cthulhu, in addition to the Apexis Blast as well, you know, none of this hurts. He's thinning out his deck of a lot of the bad cards at the same time that you don't just want to draw off the top. This is the kind of turn Alutemu has been looking for.
Yeah, the Neophyte is really the kicker here. The fact that every card was playable was nice. Alutemu feels like this is a bad turn because it still just loses to Immolation Aura even with the Neophyte because Alutemu doesn't have redevelopment on the next turn. But as we can see it, okay, there's a partial clear, but it's not the greatest for GivePLZ.
So again, we're talking about that discount on the mana of Skull of Gul'dan. The play I'm looking at on this turn is obviously Philosophy, Moarg, Fellscream Blast to heal up and clear some of the damage off the board. But do you think you should just, if you were to do that, should you save the Philosophy because you just want maximum mana available next turn with a 5-mana Skull?
Yeah, I think it has its merits, especially since the hero power is not irrelevant here. It can clear off an additional prize plunder instead of Philosophy. And on that note, I actually feel that maybe Alutemu missed on his positioning a little bit with the 2/3/2s next to each other.
Yes.
It's always something I forget as rogue, so, I mean, I'm not a Grandmaster, though.
Yeah, it's our job to be stupid, not theirs.
GivePLZ really needs to deal with this, though. I don't think he can afford to take the damage. And it's also just dumping cards from his hand so that the Skull is a bit better next turn. But it looks like he is going to favor the Philosophy, like you said. The other Moarg not guaranteed to be in hand anytime soon, so it's a safer play, even though he does have a bit less mana to work with.
Man, it was so close, and it's so dependent on what you draw. Like, if he knew that he was going to draw a 0-mana Moarg, obviously you wouldn't dream of playing the Philosophy because you'd rather copy the 0-mana Moarg and have the extra mana available for Skull. But say his next cards are, you know, another Fellscream Blast or Throwglaive or whatever, just to be able to have some removal options, then you really want another Moarg and not just a Philosophy in hand. And so given that you're working with very much imperfect information as to what the rest of your draw will be, I think GivePLZ makes a perfectly respectable decision here.
Rough play for Alutemu because he doesn't really have any natural card draw, so he's going with the Wand Thief. Cram Session is a way to draw, but it is extremely inefficient, and also, like, the Combustion gets rid of the Moarg right now, whereas he didn't really have a nice way of doing so because all of this burst damage in hand, Alutemu is saving for the face. He doesn't want to step the Prize Plunderer necessarily because I feel like if he is Tenwooing Wand Thief, then he's probably going to step the Wand Thief again as well, just to have stuff to do.
It's definitely tempting, isn't it? At the same time, no mana left over. I think you just see what your next card is, because next turn you can kind of just earmark for straight up Mask of Cthulhu if you have nothing better to do. At least it spends your mana, and then you have 2 draws to find a better use for the Shadow Step. So I don't hate just holding it here.
Fair enough, but GivePLZ now many chances at Immolation Aura and hits it right away. This board is gone.
Yeah. I definitely think it's worth it here, even though you haven't seen Janus or any of the really big hitters yet. It's just like way too much damage to be tanking.
Okay. Oh, it's also clunky. I would say, you know, if Alutemu were going into 9 mana next turn, absolutely just mass this turn, because then you can Kazakus and Golem the next turn. But
right,
it's in terms of timing with respect to what GivePLZ is doing, I think Alutemu would much rather develop this turn than just send burn damage, because he currently doesn't have enough damage to deal lethal without any minion presence, right? So you kind of want to develop minions at the time when you've just seen an Immolation Aura. But the thing is, there's no relevant minions this turn. It's just Kazakus, and then the Golem happens next turn, and it's all very, very clunky, because that would then further delay the Mask of Cthulhu for turn.
So you could obviously go Kazakus, step Kazakus, and pick 1/1 cost and 1/5 cost. It sounds bad, though, honestly, because 1-cost golems don't present threats. They're utility. They, you know, kill off one minion. They give your board +1/+1. If you don't have that, then it doesn't really present any meaningful threat. So Alutemu instead just spending his mana with the mask, going for the full-on burn plan instead.
Il'gynoth now picked up for GivePLZ, and he's got, you know, a fair amount of damage right now. Still not lethal. Like, importantly, Alutemu has stayed way above 24, which is a breakpoint, but currently only 12 for GivePLZ.
So we're looking at 0 mana Moarg being not lethal, but pretty much lethal next turn. Actually, it just is, right, with the Thalnos and the Ethereal as well. He just has
36 damage. He doesn't even need to dump any cards here.
Yeah.
Just needs to think about, is there any way he dies from 14 at 8 mana from Alutemu, 1 mage spell in hand? Sometimes, if it's double Wicked Stab and Fireball, but it's so unlikely.
Double Wicked Stab, Fireball, second Mask of Cthulhu plus Wicked Stab would be 1 off. Even if, even if they were both discounted, you still wouldn't be able to get that. It's so niche.
Yeah, and it really wasn't worth like using his Fell Scream Blast in order to play around that, because that's his combo piece. And GivePLZ looks like he is going to go to a clean 3-0, unless there is some miracle 1-cost golem I'm not thinking about at the moment.
Don't think so. On the old Kazakus potions, you could resurrect minions, right? And so you could resurrect a Cult Neophyte and then replay it with the Shadow Step. But Kazakus, the Golem Shaper, no such option is available, sadly.
He draws a card. I mean, Alutemu is going for 1 because he quite clearly knows if he does nothing to disrupt, he is dead next turn, because GivePLZ just said, I'm fine with overdrawing any cards. So that's like news that Il'gynoth is in hand and very likely lethal as well. Just a desperation play. You can see where Alutemu's head is at, though, where if there is any niche out, it comes in the form of 1-cost golem for draw. But it's not really going to do anything here, which means that GivePLZ making a 3-0. Super clean play.
Just looking unstoppable. He saw the combo obviously available last turn and executes it perfectly. Alutemu, you know, it wasn't the cleanest series from him. It wasn't a bad series by any stretch, you know, based on an average Hearthstone player. Like, I think a lot of the questionable plays he made had strong reasoning behind them. Again, that turn where he left himself dead to double Wicked Stab, it allowed him to potentially get his own OTK the following turn, so it was a calculated risk. But if nothing else, I would say Alutemu felt very uncertain that series. Usually we see him play with a bit more confidence, but here there were many situations where, based on the pace of his play, his body language as well, it just felt like he was kind of lost.
That is true. However, I think the player who did show a lot of confidence here in GivePLZ is also something that we don't necessarily see from him all that often. I'm really, really happy to see that GivePLZ has, you know, not only shown very, very clean play, but also that strong mental you were talking about. Like, we saw him pump his fist when he was winning as Control Warrior. We saw him just laughing lightheartedly when there was that Vanessa chain.
It deserves